My name is John Asprey, and I am the chair of the Iowa Alliance for Responsible Agriculture and a senior organizer with Food and Water Watch. Today's event is brought to you by a number of organizations from the Iowa Alliance for Responsible Agriculture, most notably the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom's Des Moines branch, speakers from Iowa Farmers Union, Great Plains Action Society, Iowa CCI, and from Food and Water Watch. A coalition of organizations that has been fighting to address the factory farm crisis, specifically working towards a moratorium on factory farms. In Iowa, there is a strong narrative around agriculture. Agriculture is central to Iowa's economy and its culture, but I think that there is a question that needs to be asked that, what does agriculture mean? Because there's lots of different types of agriculture. Today we wanted to sort of provide a critical perspective of the dominant narrative of what agriculture is in Iowa, what it looks like now, and what it could look like in the future.
98% of agricultural land in this country, acres, is owned by white folks. And in Iowa, that number is much, much higher. The white folks are the descendants of, colonial settlers, and they brought with them practices that have led us to where we are now. Now we're facing some pretty serious issues in Iowa, and this is why it's time to listen to Indigenous people and what they have to say concerning these farming practices, because it's like the antithesis to what has been happening, and what was cleared out to make way for civilization to come through. Meanwhile, here we are. Iowa is a big ag sacrifice zone. It is the most biologically colonized state in the country. It is the #1 contributor to the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, and a lot of that has to do with all the stuff that's being spread on crops, plus all of the stuff that's coming from hog confinement, and slaughter, and all of that stuff is getting into our waterways. It's like seeing a relative get sick. And so that's essentially what's happening right now, with these colonial capitalist farming practices. The government truly that is allowing this to happen, because our government could say no to these terrible practices, but in the end are allowing this to be more important than the health and safety of the people, the land, the water, the air. We need to change our mindsets. We need to think of the earth as our mother, something that we'd want to keep safe and healthy. And I really hope that can, just that small little flip in thinking can help us do better.
Our mission is to support family farming, sustainable agriculture, and vibrant rural communities. Our farm was settled 150 years ago. During that time, the vast majority of that time, the farm and most farms in Iowa had a wide diversity of plants and animals, crops and livestock that was used, and quickly transitioned to, over the years in the 60s and 70s, our farm, like a lot of Iowa farms, became less and less diversified, focusing on just a few crops, a few species of livestock. The landscape of Iowa's farms became less and less diversified as well. The reasons for that were mostly market-driven. The farm crisis of the 1980s, which led to more and more farms becoming less and less diversified. Diversified Iowa livestock farms for decades had an advantage over a factory livestock farm. The advantage is that they were able to raise their own feed much more economically than a factory farm could buy it. The farmer could raise it, and it could be integrated into the rest of the system. The land could not only be used for growing corn, but it could be also used as pasture, and the diversity of crops could be used in those feed rations, and it could be all done more economically than a factory farm could buy that grain. When grain prices went through a long period of depressed prices from the farm crisis on, that switched, and factory farms instead had the leg up. Farmers were producing corn for less than what their cost of production, and they were producing at a loss For years, the government might make up the difference in some cases through farm subsidies, but the marketplace to buy feed for a factory farm was more economical than a farmer raising that himself and feeding it to their own animals on a family scale. So the marketplace became more advantageous for factory farms during that time. There was very little regulatory structure for a factory farm in Iowa, practically zero regulations on a factory farm up until about 1995. And in the meantime, what has happened? We went from, and from the late 70s when we had about 60 to 70,000 farms in Iowa that were diversified with livestock done on a family-sized scale in Iowa, to today where we have probably, John, help me out, probably 6,000 farms?
Give or take.
Yeah, about almost a 90% decrease in the number of farms. And the result is the remaining farms, the factory farms that did come to Iowa became larger and larger. We've been trying to come to grips with how to deal with the massive industrialization of our livestock industry. In the meantime, we have lots of farmers in Iowa trying to raise livestock on their family farm, on a family scale, that are doing some of the most innovative things to incorporate livestock in a sustainable way on their farms. And those folks should be rewarded and be given a place in the marketplace commensurate with the valuable role they play in Iowa agriculture.
With the rise of vertical integration in the meat industry, so the big ones, the Smithfields, the JBSs, the Tysons, you have a new system where farmers don't own the hogs. They own the barn, but had it built to spec that the company provided, and they have a mortgage on it from the bank. They don't pick the feed, that's from the company. They don't use their local veterinarian, they use the company's. And the one thing they do own is the hog manure. This system has created a lot of control and funneled profits from farmers upwards. So even though the system is more productive, the per hog value is going down for the farmer, for the money that the farmer's making, and the profits are getting channeled upwards. We have seen a full capture of the legislature by corporate agriculture, and so many there was this deal to create some regulation, but not very strong regulation, and give a lot of opening for industry to expand. The way that the Iowa legislature and judiciary are making it as hard as possible to stop factory farms. The master matrix was established by a law passed in 2002. Before it, county supervisors used to decide whether a confined animal feeding operation, a factory farm, could be built. After it, well, the counties could decide that they didn't want to say it all and basically absolve themselves of any zoning, influence, or they could adopt the master matrix. The master matrix is a little rubric where essentially an application to build a factory farm is graded, and if it gets a 50% or more, which when I went to school was an F, they are approved. So it removed all local control. It basically gave county supervisors a way to have a voice but no decision-making power on zoning, which is unusual, right? Like, that's not how any other zoning decisions are made for any other thing in our society, but it is for factory farms. The next set of laws I want to talk about is right to farm. The Iowa legislature passed these laws, this law in 1995. Instead of saying, hey, I can't breathe the air outside my house because of a factory farm, you now have to prove that that factory farm is breaking the law, and that they've been doing it for a long time, and that they're doing something that the rest of the industry isn't doing. But because the entire industry is doing everything very similarly, it's kind of hard to check that box. Essentially, if the state says there's no problem, and the courts can't overturn it. Ag-gag. Who here's heard of ag-gag laws, by the way? Okay, some of the folks. Basically, these are a series of laws that target animal rights and environmental activists investigating farms. So it is agricultural gag law. Because because factory farms rely on secrecy. Factory farms, it rises often to a level of brutality that I think most everyday people are not comfortable with. And so this industry relies on the public not really knowing how their food is made in order to skate by. Iowa has passed, since 2012, 4 laws targeting environmental and animal rights activists. The Iowa legislature has been hard at work for big ag, passing laws to target their political enemies, and only through luck and the limited rights under the Constitution have most of these laws been struck down.
Since 1974, we have more than doubled, in fact, the number of hogs we raise. And we have decreased the number of operations from about 60,000 to 5,660. But actually, it is even worse than these numbers make it look like, because essentially what it means is 3,600 operations have an inventory of over 22 million hogs. So by any standards, including the Clean Water Act, we should consider these facilities point sources, and we should regulate them as such. Unfortunately, as some of the prior discussion made clear, we are not treating these facilities as such. And so what are the kind of things we're doing to allegedly, purportedly, address the pollution that these facilities cause? Well, I would argue that the things we're doing are actually a very institutionalized form of greenwashing, because we use 2 main methods. We essentially allow these facilities to operate as presumed non-polluters until they're caught, right? And that's unfortunately because of a court decision. And so we use a voluntary approach, which is incorporated into the master matrix, in the sense that the master matrix just says this is where they're going to be, but then we don't really do very much monitoring. The manure management plans that these facilities are supposed to produce are very, very poorly monitored, so we don't know if the same farm is applying the manure at non-agronomic rates. We don't know if multiple farms are using the same field to apply multiple times manure going above the agronomic rates. We allow these facilities to operate as if they were not point sources, and we give them money to do conservation stuff. We also don't monitor whether that conservation stuff is actually being implemented, by the way. And there are reports of the Office of the Inspector General at the USDA and the General Accounting Office that show that that's the case. There is no addressing all the problems, particularly from the social and economic side, that, for example, Aaron mentioned. This is not going to reduce consolidation of the industry. This is not fundamentally going to change the production methods that are reliant on fossil fuels and that pollute our water, right? If you produce renewable natural gas, you're getting rid of the methane in the manure, allegedly, but you're not doing anything for nitrogen and phosphorus. So that digestate still has to be, put in fields the same way manure is, for example. So they are overselling these solutions because these solutions allow the industry to continue to operate in fundamentally the same way. They introduce another income stream, right? Because they're going to sell the natural gas, they're going to sell the CO2, or they're going to receive credits for producing the CO2. So the situation is, in fact, due to all the money that is being put forth through the Inflation Reduction Act, put most likely in the next Farm Bill, and through regulatory changes at the state level, which we are already seeing because we have already passed laws that make the production of this renewable natural gas easier, things are actually going to get worse.
There are a number of false solutions that are being promoted and passed passed as policy in order to pretend that industry and lawmakers are addressing the crises caused by factory farming. Like John mentioned, there are several changes that can and need to be made on both the state and federal level so that we can have a better food and farm system and a more sustainable Iowa. On the federal level, Congress is expected to pass a new farm bill every 5 to 6 years and are expected to pass a new farm bill sometime this year. And we, the people in the room where you all are and attending virtually, need to be a part of that. The Farm Bill can help us, but in the past, it's been designed to hand over public dollars to factory farms. We want pasture-based, rotational grazing, and we want to have the resources to teach people and help people to incorporate those practices on their farms. But we know at the same time that most of the meat in our country comes from factory farms. So when you say that 50% of EQIP funding has to go to livestock, what that actually means, and especially in a state like Iowa, where there are so many factory farms, those contracts are actually going to pay factory farm operators to have things like manure pits and spray manure. So like Sylvia was saying, they are getting environmental quality incentives to do this. This is an example of how programs intended for good have turned into handouts for the factory farm industry. So we need to make sure that the Farm Bill does not include any incentives for false solutions like factory farm gas, which we know only props up the industry and speeds up factory farm expansion. That IRA and other organizations are pushing for is a moratorium on new and expanding factory farms. Joanne and Sharon will talk more about this soon, but I just want to mention there are several steps that we can take to get closer to the moratorium that we need. At the state level, we need real local control. At the county level against factory farms, we have to lower the animal unit thresholds for construction permits and manure management plans, increase separation distances for factory farm construction and manure spreading from homes, public spaces, waterways, other things like that. Increase the minimum scores needed on the master matrix, like John and Sylvia were talking about. Eliminate the pollution control tax exemption for concrete manure kits. Increase max fine and penalties assessed by the DNR. I believe they can only fine somebody up to $10,000 right now. Fully fund the DNR to bring back their staff capacity and programs like volunteer water quality testing, and eliminate those nuisance lawsuit protections for factory farms like John was talking about too. All of these steps can help us get closer to a factory farm moratorium and an Iowa that we want to live in. So now is the time for change and for us to unite in organized people power to resist corporate agriculture and get our elected officials to pass the kind of policies that we need to make a positive impact in our communities and our state. It's up to us. We can do it.
Well, you've heard a little bit of good news, but you've heard quite a bit of bad news about what the situation is regarding factory farms. But I've come to change the situation, and I bring some good news. For the first time, citizens are standing up and objecting to someone when they propose a CAFO in their community, in their county. And so, for the very first time, in Worth County, Tama County, and what was the other one?
Howard.
Yes, County. They have expressed themselves about this possibility that there's going to be a CAFO, and the people have risen up and made their feelings known, and the CAFO applications have been withdrawn. And this is a wonderful, wonderful piece of progress. We're very well known because we go out and demonstrate once a year against the World Food Prize. Goodbye, Kenneth Quinn. We now have new administrator at the World Food Prize, and I get it from a very dependable inside source that the executive committee is looking away from corporate ag, and they're putting their sights on a regenerative and organic agriculture, which is very exciting. To get on the lawn, we had to file a lawsuit against the World Food Prize, and we won against also the state of Iowa, and we won $50,000. So we now go up on the grass to demonstrate. Finally, We know also that 63% of the people in Iowa support a CAFO moratorium. That is wonderful news, and it's only going to get better. Things are changing. World food prices changing. Farmers are more interested in regenerative agriculture. And citizens are rising up against CAFOs and people with withdrawing their application. So this is very exciting. What we're all doing is forming a foundation. The CAFO moratorium is building a foundation in Iowa. And this is really true. And so for every one of you who makes a telephone call or writes a letter to the editor or speaks to a neighbor about the dangers and the terrible things that CAFOs do to our state, you add another brick to that foundation. So we want to keep on doing it and keep on trying to influence everybody we know in every opportunity to speak out against the dangers and the terrible things that CAFOs are doing to our state. Things are changing in the state, and they're getting better. Thank you.